Welcome to the Will and Dave Show, where we talk about hard things, whether it's comfortable or not. We think those conversations are necessary and important. We think that having different opinions is crucial to a healthy discourse. So saddle up and enjoy the fireside chat.
Oh, William.
Hello.
I'm not sure I'm going to have fun this weekend, but hey, let's get this nonsense over with.
Now. Be more charitable.
I might be saying the bad words this weekend.
For the first time on the show, we finally have a guest who's more from my perspective, from a more progressive side, and I'm excited. I'm excited to not be on the back foot the entire conversation.
There you go. That'll be me.
It makes me happy. Okay.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. How was your week? It's actually, how was your 3 weeks? Because we haven't been on the air for 3 weeks.
Yeah, it was good. I did a play. I was in a play the previous weekend. It went very well. Excuse me.
Do you have any lines you can recite? I think I've asked you this before.
I do not have lines. Not that would be funny out of context, at least.
What a schmuck. So
I
went to see a play today.
You did actually. I knew that.
I went to see The Murder on the Orient Express. It was actually very good.
I'm glad to hear it.
They had a lady on who was from the Midwest, from Minnesota. But all she did was use a Canadian accent. It was a this and a boot, and she was a Canadian, just who said she was from Minnesota.
It's remarkable how many similarities the Minnesota
Yes.
accent and Canadian like the
Yeah, the
Western Canadian
Midwest.
accent.
Yeah.
It's quite fun.
So yes, I got my taste of high society today at the local civic theater. But other than that, did you work? Are you working lots?
Oh, yeah. Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
We're hitting our busy season now. We're in the beginning of our very busiest season, so
Gotcha.
we're balls to the walls.
That sounds
I was act-
painful.
yeah, I was acting as Sawyer this week as our Sawyer was on vacation, which he deserved, and I'm happy for him. But I'm not a particularly great Sawyer, so it's been stressful, but not bad.
So how many mistakes did you make?
I mean,
Are you able to count them on one hand, or do you need multiple hands and
oh
feet?
no. I can count the mistakes on two hands per job, but that's normal.
Oh,
When I'm cutting hundreds of boards, inevitably having like 5 to 10 mistakes, and some of them are mistakes that are mistakes I made. Some of them are board defects that I didn't catch while they were coming through, stuff like that. It
gotcha.
happens. It's not the end of the world.
It does
Every
happen.
project has recuts that need to happen.
It does happen. Hey, you know what? Our like and subscribe thing is showing up again all of a sudden.
I mean, hey, whatever works.
Now, if only I knew how the hell I made it work.
Don't sniff a gift fish, Dave.
That's right. So while we're here, let's talk about sponsorships. If you want to
Mhm.
support
Mhm.
the show, why don't you go to Buy Me a Coffee / Will and Dave Show, and for the price of one American cup of coffee, which with the rate of inflation at this rate, it's going to be like $1,100 Canadian. You can buy us a cup of coffee, and I'll go up to Canada and I will share some with William, maybe, or I'll keep it all for myself.
You can just have it. You can
I
just
can-
have it.
I
Yeah,
guess
it's
have it.
fine. Yeah, you can just have it.
Yeah, so Buy Me a Coffee / Will and Dave Show, and
Mhm.
you can support the show. Who would you like to say thank you to today?
Well, we are also supported by Stitched by Susan, and I'm going to start calling it the Stitched by Susan media empire at this point. So
Isn't
Stitched
that
by
the
Susan,
truth?
Stitched by Susan has a podcast, Measure Twice, Cut Once. She has courses where she trains you how to be a better quilter or how to be a quilter in general, whether you've done it before or not. She has all manner of media surrounding quilting, from Instagram videos to live streams, anything quilting. Susan probably has something for you. And so we cannot recommend checking her and her content out. That's Stitched by Susan on Instagram, or Measure Twice, Cut Once on Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are found, really.
So I'm just looking at her podcast while you are extolling the virtues of Stitched by Susan, and she's been doing it for a shorter amount of time than we have,
Mhm.
and she's at 46,000 downloads.
Mhm.
She rocks it.
She's doing awesome.
Yeah. And the other one we'd like to say thank you to is Northern Trust, who may or may not be related to me as my brother and be your boss. So
Maybe.
you should maybe use as a little bit of incentive that you'll make less mistakes if he supports the show more. It gives us a bit of a check.
I don't know if those two things correlate at all.
Darn it.
But sure. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, sure.
Mallory, if you're watching the show, we think you do amazing stuff in Fort St. John, even with the price of lumber and gas skyrocketing through the roof. But you know what? You're awesome, and we thank you for supporting the show. Northern Trust in Fort St. John, 250-787-3033. One of these weeks, you'll remember that number too.
I don't know if I've ever actually called it myself.
So
I
there's
might have
a
called it the day I got hired.
whole lot in the news. We're going to leave all of it for next week, as this week we have a guest who is a friend of yours.
Mhm.
And I've known him over the years, but I sort of lost, I grew up, moved away, and stuff. He didn't grow up, apparently, and he didn't move away. I don't know how the hell that goes, but you and he have remained friends.
Yes.
So why don't you introduce him, and I will, after you do that, I will bring him in the show.
Okay. So I've known Chase. Unknowingly, I've known him my entire life. As it turns out, our mothers were neighbors in the hospital after we were born, within 48 hours of each other. We met again as young adults doing improv, and then we spent a lot of time in the church together. And We were roommates for a while. We spent a ton of time together. Chase is truly one of my closest and dearest friends. And recently, he's gone on a new journey, joining the Satanic Temple. And so when we brought up the Satanic Temple one of the previous weeks to talk about an event that had happened, part of that was spurred on by the fact that he showed me the video. He led me on to that news story. And in the process of talking about it, we realized that we really don't know what the hell we're talking about when it comes to the Satanic Temple. And so,
Isn't that the case with most of our topics?
It is. So we have him on the show to educate us, to help us understand the thing that we don't know anything about a little bit better. So hi, Chase. How are you?
I'm actually doing really good. Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Hey, thanks for showing up.
It's genuinely a pleasure. I'm giddy.
Well, speak for yourself. I may not be having much fun by the end of the show.
So
learning's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Says you. I'm an old fart. I don't like
learning
to learn anymore.
Okay.
There's a quote in Ted Lasso. It's "Be curious, not judgmental." I love that quote. That's like one of my favorite quotes. We're being curious today.
I kind of like that, actually.
It's good, isn't it?
I'm not a fan of Ted Lasso, but hey.
Everyone's allowed to be wrong every now and then, and this is your time, apparently.
Oh, them fighting words.
So in the spirit of what we do with most of our guests is we bring you on less to grill you or debate you or anything, but we're hoping to be educated by you. So Chase, you want to walk us through, let's start with how you came to be a member of the Satanic Temple, and then we can lead into what the Satanic Temple is and what it's about.
Oh, yeah. So how I came into it is definitely ironic because I was, like you mentioned earlier, raised in the church, and very fundamentalist, biblical inerrantist, all that fun stuff. And so I grew up thinking that the devil is the enemy of God and all that other fun stuff. And a couple of years ago, I deconstructed and deconverted from Christianity just as I got to learn more about science, philosophy, other world religions. And I just started looking into different groups and different religions, ideologies, philosophies. And there was actually a rather fun documentary that showed up on Netflix for a while there called Hail Satan, with a question mark. And it just kind of broke down what the temple does, how they interact with things, their viewpoints on religion, and how they would come to be recognized as a religious entity. So as I found out more and more about them, I actually realized as I looked through their tenets, their history, and even getting a better biblical understanding of where our more modern ideas of Satan come from, I just realized I identify with these already. So if you already identify with something, it's just the next logical step to be a little bit more open about it, at least for somebody like me.
Mm.
So you are a member of what? The Church of Satan, or is it the Satanic Temple? I want to clarify because there is a difference, and I'm reading the differences, which we'll bring up. So which are you, or are you a member of either? You just hold to their beliefs?
Okay, so I and my wife are members of the Satanic Temple.
Okay.
The Church of Satan was established in 1966 by Anton LaVey,
Okay.
A rather colorful character throughout history. Originally involved in like circus stuff, and he was a showman, and there were some other kind of weird things that he got involved with. The Satanic Temple, on the other hand, was established in 2013.
Okay.
And it's located in, got it here somewhere, Salem, which I think was kind of more of a humor thing based off of the Salem witch trials.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is this like a tongue-in-cheek nod to the Salem witch trials? And obviously it was.
It's acknowledging the religious history in the area, so it just kind of made sense.
Okay. If you don't mind, Chase, I'm going to ask you some questions because I have some there obviously are going to be some differences here that
Of course.
sort of are foundational, and William can jump on and answer them if he likes to. There's no fees for your organization, and there is in the Church of Satan. Is there a reason why it's free to join the Satanic Temple?
There you go. It's just, it would be similar to joining, just to keep it familiar with what you and I would be more familiar with throughout history. Like similar with joining any church, it's meant more to build community than anything else. So it doesn't make sense to put a financial bar in the way.
Right.
So that is why, yeah, they accept donations and they use those to fund different things that they're working towards, be it pushing for religious pluralism, helping improve the educational system, stuff like that. But that's all donation based as opposed to a required thing.
Gotcha. So I got into this a little bit with Will.
Yeah.
I threw an easy ball for the first one. When you have a temple named the Satanic Temple,
Yes.
and then you say, I don't believe in Satan, and yet I'm going to call it the Satanic Temple. I asked Will, and I will ask you, that's like saying I like Italian restaurants, except I don't eat Italian food. I don't eat pasta. It's sort of, then why don't you go to Red Robin, or go to Taco Bell? It's disingenuous, I feel, in saying I don't believe in Satan. I don't think he's real. And yet I'm going to be a member of the Satanic Temple or any other organization which would have a name to it. Does that make sense a little bit?
Oh, yeah. And I'd be happy to elaborate on that and explain it a little bit better. So, as you said, we don't believe in a literal Satan, but it's more of an appreciation of the idea of the ultimate rebel. It's rebellion against authoritarian standards and the embracing of everyone having the freedom to believe whatever they want. And at least within more modern understandings of Satan, he's effectively the ultimate rebel against unjustifiable authority.
So it's more of a nod towards a literary Satan than a biblical Satan.
And it also just acknowledges the root of the Hebrew word Satan, which is actually translated as either adversary or accuser. And that is something that certainly happens within Satanism, is we hold up a mirror to religious extremism, and we seek to help people both better understand their own religions and to, it might sound odd, but to help everyone get along more. And we believe that the image of Satan best allows for that, despite being a not actual character or a literal entity.
So do you believe in the historical, how to word this, portrayal of Satan?
That's an interesting question. It depends on how one would understand it, because a lot of our ideas of Satan that are popularly spread today, be it, the
Hellboy.
the Hellboy kind of thing, or whatever. Actually, when you break it down, within the Hebrew scriptures, like Judeo-Christian tradition, Satan actually, by and large, is a later addition, predominantly in extra-biblical texts that were found in things like the Dead Sea Scrolls and added later in church tradition. So the idea of Satan doesn't really make a lot of sense within most understandings of it. Like the serpent in the Garden of Eden was never meant to. It was simply a talking serpent. The character, the Satan in the Book of Job, was actually, it was treated more like a job title within the understanding of the religious text of the time. So the Satan, the accuser, would be considered more like a lawyer in the court of God.
So I won't argue on the Book of Job as that's one that has a lot of people wondering about the authorship, etc. Is it allegorical? Is it not? I get lots of people look at the Book of Job. I think that the historical role of Satan in the church is the opposition of God. As you would say, he is the ultimate rebel. He's the anti-God. He's the anti-Christ. He is the opposite of. Yes, no?
Sorry, I was just wanting to make sure. I'm just trying to make sure I actually let you finish your thoughts before I cut in, because I can be bad for that. Just ask my wife.
Don't, because William will jump in over me all the time. And he started to say something, so I won't let you finish, Will.
Yeah, you said he was the antithesis of God. What was the wording?
The Antichrist, anti-God. So in the historical viewpoint,
it's a historical viewpoint, though, that's created by that same religious group. So anyone outside the religious group co-opting the literary notion of Satan could be a totally different thing than what Christians view Satan as, and they don't have to be congruent.
But I guess I would ask you, William, if that is the case, he is a construct of the Christian religion. If he's not real, if he is a mythical, not actually there, he is a construction of the Christian organization. And so to co-opt him and say, well, he's not really bad, he's good, we're going to use him.
I would say some of his iconography is co-opted by Christianity. Some of it isn't.
Okay, go ahead.
And if I can jump in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Basically, because I know one of the things that you commented on, Dave, was calling Satanism like a joke religion, not unlike, say, Pastafarianism.
Yes.
Oh, was that you? Oh, I apologize.
That was actually me, I think. I'll take the heat for that one.
Okay.
But I agreed with him, so that's okay. You can yell at me.
Okay. Either way. So what it is, a more accurate way to describe it would be, it's a response religion, and it's very much based off of geography, because so let me put it this way. So in North America, the predominant accepted religion is Christianity.
Yes.
And so Satan is the understood accuser of it, the one challenging it, saying, is this actually true? Is this correct? If it were to be manifested somewhere in, say, the Middle East, where a different religion was predominant, then it very likely would take on a different face. It simply uses it because it is a very, for lack of a better way to put it, a very recognizable intellectual property.
Right.
And it evokes a response. And that's one of the big things that we desire, is to keep the conversation moving, and through darker imagery that is admittedly shocking and off-putting, it can allow for people to have conversations like what we're having now. And so that would be the reason for it, is it helps evoke reaction and response, to have talking points about religious, like religion and how it interacts with us in society and on a governmental level, stuff like that.
So
is that making much sense?
Yeah, the question that we got asked here in the comments, you basically just answered it without even knowing, quite effectively, I think.
I guess I would. This is hard for me, as I'm trying to play a little bit of the devil's advocate, but it's hard to. Yep. Or to understand it, I guess, is what I'm trying to do, is when I look at you're using it in your words as sort of a response religion,
Absolutely.
as an accusatory religion, if you'll forgive the adversarial, that
It's all good.
context. You're using it to say, here's Christianity, and for a lot of the right, you're out to lunch, and so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take what you believe is bad. We're going to start a religion which sort of, it holds that up as sort of a torch that says, we don't really agree with the Satanist viewpoint, as a reality. We're just going to use it because we don't like what you guys do.
Actually,
Is that fair?
A better way to put it is that, as a general rule, we are happy to live and let live. Like, all of my family are still very conservative Christians, and I wouldn't seek to remove them from their Christian faith.
Well, I'm sure they pray for you on a pretty regular basis.
I don't think they're even aware that they're only aware that I do not believe in God.
Okay.
That's not it. That's a different. Yeah, but that's its own can of worms that's going to be opened at some point. But yeah, so it's not actually in opposition to it. It's simply stating ideas that we want all religions to be accepted in the public place and not given any preferential treatment over that, because we see it, I think, definitely more so in the States than in Canada. Canada certainly has a more accepting liberal agenda, and for us, we simply take into account things just the way that religious extremism is being used to push harmful ideas, and we want to push back against that. If you have good ideas, whether it's derived from the Christian text, from the Bhagavad Gita, or from any other religious text, we are happy to say, yeah, you go for that and embrace that. If it helps you be a better person, by all means. So we wouldn't want to take away from that. We simply want to make sure that in the public space that everyone, regardless of what they believe, is being accepted, and that our ideals and our public stances, in public squares, are being informed by science and by reason, as opposed to religious texts.
And yet your name, the name of your group, of your religion, is Christian. Satan is birthed in Christianity. His whole existence is from Christianity. If it wasn't for Christianity, you wouldn't have a Satan. Is that not fair to say?
And that's where I agree, and I say that it's not unfair to call it a response religion. We look at where things come from. But like I said earlier, in it being a response, with us seeing none of it as real, it simply is it's iconography, and it's an image for rebellion. Not dissimilar to how in the 60s you had, the whole thing of free love and stuff like that pushing against it. It simply is a face for it.
Okay.
We don't really care for it one way or another.
Right.
Because it's not an important image. It's just useful to have an image, and it's one that evokes response.
I feel like, yeah, it's, I don't want to demean all the effort that goes into the thought behind the iconography, but I'm seeing it being used as like a coat of paint, or almost like an advertising tactic, because the predominant religion that they're pushing back against or finding themselves in contention with would be Christianity. It would make sense to pull from Christianity for their iconography to kind of plant the flag that that's where their primary opposition is going to exist.
And there's also just a certain amount of, there's fun with it. There's certainly, it's because as is found in the tenets, the right to offend is something that we hold very dearly, which I know can sound bad, but when you break it down, any religion or hard philosophical stance can and will be considered offensive to somebody that views things differently. And so we see that as a critical thing to support and to encourage. And so it's because it's considered offensive imagery, but it can't really be justified in being inherently harmful. That's the appeal of using imagery like that.
So I would absolutely agree that the imagery is it's sort of shock imagery. If we go back to
absolutely.
Howard Stern, he says a lot of harsh, outlandish things, and he does it to make a point. I don't believe that he believes everything he says. I believe he's an actor, he's an entertainer, and he says things in such a way that he believes to make a point. And I believe, if I hear you right, this organization is really there to poke holes and to jab at some of the religious right. Is that a fair? To look at what you don't like and look at the things which are wrong and say, hey, we want to poke holes, we want to make fun of you, we want to laugh at you, and here's our example. We're going to use your antithesis as our face.
I like the term that Chase used, holding a mirror up to, as opposed to poking holes in or laughing at. Like, we were talking very briefly before the show about Tucker Carlson having one of the co-founders of the Satanic Temple on his show. And Tucker Carlson got lost a lot in the fact that this after-school program they were talking about during the show, because there's the after-school Satan program.
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson's mind, that is like, wow, that's just evil iconography. How can you put kids through that? And the purpose of the Satanic Temple doing it is to hold a mirror up to Christian after-school programs and say, your thing is just as silly, just with a different coat of paint. It's still easily viewed as indoctrination by anyone who's outside of your religion. And every religion should have the opportunity to do it. Or
that,
not, as long as
or, yeah, simply, if they're, in the words of the Christian apologist, Dr. William Lane Craig, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. So if...
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that.
I would agree. Just for me, I guess, as a member of the religious right, I look at that and I say, okay, except I do believe in a God.
Yes.
And I do believe in moral values, and I believe that he gave us those moral values.
Right.
So when you come at me and you're holding that mirror up, you're saying, haha, I'm going to do the Satan thing. And we're going to sort of, it is poking fun as it was. As there's some humor that says, hey, we're going to take the opposite of you and hold that up and say, it's the same thing.
It's a challenge to it.
Right. And when
it's a challenge saying, are your values actually derived from your religion, or are these actually values that you hold to and you simply use aspects of your religion or religious texts to either justify or adhere to them? So when we see things like schools bringing in different clubs and memberships for children that push that sort of thing.
Right.
The reason why we hold up a mirror and we bring in our stuff is because we don't actually believe that one should be pushing religious views on children. They should be allowed to learn about things in an equal opportunity fashion. So with the after school Satan Club, it's just bringing in.
I'm looking up as we speak. I'm looking at it here.
Yeah. It's bringing in like fun activities and learning opportunities, and it's seeking to teach things like critical thinking and stuff like that. So it's, as opposed to saying these are a set of values that you must adhere to because I have a book that says so.
So I got into this a little bit with William.
Okay.
That one of the viewpoints that I hold is that it's not about the religious aspect, it's about the majority aspect. The majority of Americans are Christian.
Yes.
they
depending
believe
on
in a
what you
Christian
accept
value.
as Christian.
Yes,
Yeah.
different aspects of
self-identify as.
Christianity. Exactly, they self-identify it as
Mhm.
Christian. And so when you look at the after-school programs, look at the in-school programs, you look at, if it be prayer in school, if it be any number of the things, the reason we have it is because of the rule of the majority. And you're saying we don't want that because it shouldn't be the rule of majority. It should be the rule of the right. And we're going to hold a mirror up and say, if you get this, then we get this. As it should be equal time, except I'm saying, as a member of the majority, no, because I have more people who agree with me. Is that not fair?
The problem comes into play when it's not just the majority that's doing it. It's the majority is the only group that's really allowed to do it. You're not going to have after school Muslim groups or after school Islamic groups that are pushing their religion be allowed in most American schools. That's a hard no from virtually everything.
Well,
So it's
that
not just that the majority does it, it's that the majority has consolidated power enough to say that we can do it and nobody else is allowed to do it, and that's a problem.
but that may be a result of the fact of a group of Muslims who flew a bunch of planes into buildings in the U.S.,
Yeah,
which
a
have
whole bunch of
skewed that
cough,
perception.
cough Salem witch trials, cough. Christians have done so many awful things, and we can't judge the entire
Absolutely.
group on the acts of a few.
No, we can't. Although in a country or in a nation, I think you have to. Okay, what are
Chase
you
is just
laughing?
Chase is just caught in the middle of us arguing right
That's
now.
okay. I'm gonna let you
I
respond,
think
Chase.
one of the things that we greatly admire is the foundations under which the United States of America were founded on, and we believe that the best way to protect people's right to believe whatever they want is to keep the government and to keep the public space either pluralistic, where we accept all of them, or to keep it secular, which are actually the values under which the founding fathers founded the United States of America on. So we're not actually trying to take away from the religious right or from Christians. Ironically, we're trying to protect those both in the Christian circles and in more minor groups, because it only works so long as your religion is number one. It only works in your favor. But as soon as you put more theocratic views in the public space, and that is what determines things, then it's opening a horrible can of worms that we sincerely believe Christians don't actually want. We don't actually think that you want a theocratic government, because if the modern statistics continue to follow, the Islamic faith is going to eclipse Christianity. And so we don't want to see you guys being persecuted or being belittled, simply everyone having an equal space.
The image that comes to my mind when I think of this is James Dean, the old actor, the ultimate rebel. This idea of the accuser, of the opposition, of, in terms of government, it would be the legal opposition or the majority opposition. It would be the Republican and to my Democrat, or the liberal to my conservative. I can see that. We want to offer an alternative to balance out these ideas of the one side. One of the differences, and this is where you lose a lot of the religious right, and I won't even say the religious right as much as most of the Christians, is we do believe in Satan, and we do believe in God, and we do believe in there's an entity outside of us which can it made us. So your opposition in saying, I don't really believe in it, and yet I'm going to use an icon. It's hard for any Christian and to look at that and agree with it, as you're using an entity that we do believe actually exists. And it exists in the exact way that you're using it as the anti-God, that if God is good, it is evil. So for you, it's not a belief, but for us, it is. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And as
And you can look at
earlier,
it and say you're out to lunch. It's not real, but to us, it's real. And that's what makes it a little bit harder to swallow.
I guess I'm trying to figure out where you're going with this.
If all things were equal, I could agree with you. But it's not equal is I believe in a God, I believe in a Satan, and you do not.
So effectively, you're finding the usage of a satanic iconography distasteful or
Not distasteful.
offensive.
I won't go that far. I think that it's using it in such a way that you know the result it's going to get.
I think
Because I
that's
think
the
it's on
intent.
purpose.
Yeah.
As you're saying, I know you believe in this, and we're going to grab it as you believe in it. We
How
don't.
else,
It's hard to go there as a Christian.
how else do you create an organization in 2013 and in less than a decade have it be a nationally reaching group, but through really, really good branding? And it's not necessarily always going to be good recognition. It's just recognition.
And I'll be the first one to agree with that. Look at Howard Stern. Look at Andrew Dice Clay. Look
Howard
at
Stern's getting a lot of free press today.
like all shock jocks.
Yeah.
Look at Will Smith, who walks up on stage and slaps a guy. Got more media coverage out of one act of violence than anybody, or than he had months or years probably. It's not that it's horrible marketing. It just, I wonder if it will gain its goal, which is equality. If I hear you right, is you are saying you actually want to stick up for the rights of Christians, as you're afraid they might be persecuted in the future, and we want to make it all equal. Is that a fair?
In the public space, we think that it is in the best interest of people, if they are to have the freedom to believe what they want, if we either embrace religious pluralism, under which everybody's religion has equal footing, or it has no footing, at least in the public square. We believe that just simply best accommodates that. And yeah, using the imagery as such, it wouldn't be unfair to call it simply loud activism and atheism. And us simply going, okay, we don't believe in theistic religion,
Right.
but we want to respect your right to do so. But we also think that the idea of religion and how it's perceived in public needs some updating, to be polite.
And like,
Well, don't be polite. I'd rather have you not be polite and give me the way you really feel about it. And I'm serious. I don't need you to be polite, and I don't need you to be polite to the one viewer who's watching the show. So don't worry about being polite. Let's have the conversation in its realest form.
So yeah, with us in that, we simply just want to see. Sorry, just trying to figure out how to phrase this in a intelligent fashion. We want to see people in their predominantly have their religion in a personal aspect as opposed to a public aspect. But if we're going to have it publicly, then let's celebrate it. Let's use it as a unifying thing. As in, you believe in the Christian God,
Right.
and you believe that when you die, you will go to heaven. That's fantastic. And the majority of atheists, Satanists, and people of other religions, we take no issue with it. The only things that we're taking issue with is when somebody's religious beliefs are pushing for what we consider things that are harmful to society. So when I went to my younger brother's baptism a couple of months ago, I couldn't have been more thrilled for him, because it's something that brings him a feeling of purpose and a sense of fulfillment, and it gives him a community sense, and that's fantastic, and I would never want to take that away from him. But if he was using his then Christian belief to support something like slavery, I would go, ooh, maybe let's step on the brakes with that.
Let's use a real world example.
You're saying Christianity has not justified slavery?
No, I'm saying, what would you use in a modern context? Because that's not a modern context.
We can use
a modern context.
We could theoretically use the current kerfuffle around abortion as a good context, where Christianity seems to have or Christianity seems to be a large driving factor in how we're reviewing the constitutional or the effect of the Constitution on abortion, whereas I believe from a Satanic Temple perspective, it's interfering with a person's bodily autonomy, so they would be vehemently against it.
That is very much the case. And I know there is definitely a raging debate back and forth about does life begin in conception, and it's a conversation it's a very, by necessity, nuanced conversation that must happen. But we very firmly believe that within modern stuff, Christianity is using outdated ideas and even extra biblical ideas to push for pro-life. Because actually, when you break down the Christian Bible, it more frequently actually pushes for abortion than it does for the pro-life thing. It's kind of messed up.
The abortion is a hard one for me to debate, as Will and I have talked at length about the fact that we're a couple of guys. We don't really, we have opinions, but it's hard for us to hold a whole lot of.
In this case, it's
authority.
less about the actual abortion debate as much as it is using that to frame how the Satanic Temple is going to act is acting in an opposing direction to Christianity, but how to word it? It's acting in opposition to Christianity based on the tenets of the Satanic Temple, but it's a tenet that it wants for everyone. I wanted to use it as a way to exemplify that they're not using it to take away anyone's rights. They're not using it in direct opposition to Christianity. They're using it as pushback, wanting more rights for all.
The abortion one, I think, is a hard. So give me another one that's isn't as polarizing.
I mean, we could use the after-school programs. The idea of
the after-school programs, though, is a majority rule thing, though. Again,
no. All right, here's an easy one.
Okay,
if I may.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would push very hard against is that is often pushed in religious circles is circumcision.
Okay.
Both male and female.
Okay.
That is violating the bodily rights of the born individual before they have reached an age of consent. Don't get me wrong. As a grown adult, if you want to do whatever you want to your body, by all means.
Right.
I'm happy to stay out of that.
Yeah.
That's your personal body. That's your personal life. And so when we look at that, we would say, no, that is violating one's bodily autonomy to force something like that on a child. Okay. And we believe that any justification that has been used historically or religiously is off of either unsound theology or just frankly outdated information. And so one of the things that we're pushing for with that is to push for us to act on the best information available, be it scientifically, socially, and what we've learned.
You won't get a lot of argument from me on that one either, because I think that there are lots of things that I don't get in the Old Testament. That's one of them that has been carried forward. There are reasons for cleanliness, which I believe in the early 1900s, or not 19, in the early, in the Old Testament times, there's a reason for it.
Yeah, nobody wanted dick cheese.
Yeah, exactly. There just was not the cleanliness issue. Just is not as much of an issue. I think that yeah, so I won't argue much with that one. I think that's an argument that you could have in a science arena, that you wouldn't have to take the satanic view by iconography to have that conversation.
You certainly don't need it to push forward that. And so if you want to talk about it while a couple of dudes are just wearing white t-shirts, who cares about the appearance of the individuals having the conversation? We simply want to make sure that when we're bringing these topics up, be it things about the pro-life or pro-choice debate, or the religious justification, and for reasons that blow my mind, the still legality of circumcising children. We simply want to push forward with the best information possible, and unfortunately, you need something to help push that forward towards having that conversation. You need something that's very visible, not dissimilar to the feminist movement with the whole bra burning thing. Now, that doesn't actually serve much purpose. A woman would still need to wear them, but it was about doing something that's provocative, that brings the conversation forward. Because you'll still find many feminists, despite them wanting equality in the workspace, in public space, and just in day-to-day life. It was about doing something provocative to get it out, to make the conversation happen. Because as long as you're simply being quiet and polite at all points, then it's easy, when you're a minority view, to simply get pushed to the side.
I would agree with that. I think that when you take and that's a great example, actually. You got the bra burning in the 70s, in the early 80s, even later than that, I guess. And thinking about it, it wasn't all that long ago. It was an argument against the status, or what was normal. Again, that's one that I won't have much of opinion on, because I'm getting the point. Me and Will are getting the point where we might have to start wearing them ourselves. So
I'm sitting back, and I'm not interjecting a lot with this, because something's happening that I don't want to toot my own horn, but I kind of suspected might happen with this conversation, that when we get down to the nitty-gritties and we talk the nuance of different issues, whether it be touching on abortion at least, or we talk about representation in schools, or we talk about with the bras, or what was it when we brought up again? Now, I'm having a mind blank, and I don't know why, because I literally had this speech all planned out in my head.
Circumcision.
Yeah, circumcisions. Yeah, right. So every one of these topics, we're finding a significant amount of common ground between the actual, like, when you get into the nuance of the belief system of the Satanic Temple. All too often, those... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and that's one of the things that we're trying to push for, is different doesn't mean bad.
Yeah, because it's not even different. Like, a lot of these views, you could boil them down, and you could find a lot of interconnectionality between Satanic Temple views and libertarian views.
And you can go ahead.
It's freedom. It's a search for freedom, and that would easily be attached to a more libertarian movement. but because it deals with religion a lot, they picked the iconography and they picked the coat of paint and the advertising. I say that loosely, not to say that's the only reason they did it, but the advertising strategy of using Satan and satanic iconography, because it's bombastic, it gets the word out, and it may leave a bad taste in some Christians' mouths, but the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of shared goals there if you can look beyond that surface, that coat of paint.
I guess that's a part that makes it a hard sell for me. Is the whole basis of this show is to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What it's not a basis for is I'm old and I'm right and you are young and you're right. And we're just going to get mad at each other every time, and we're going to use every example to make you look bad. Again, that is from the right's perspective. It's sort of it gets their hackles up as soon as you walk up and you say, "I'm a member of the Satanic Temple."
Hello, can I talk to you about our Lord and Savior Satan?
You're going to get their hackles up, and you know it.
You know what?
But look at what's able to happen here. We can now have a conversation because it's a starting point.
We could have had the conversation regardless, I guess, is my point.
But would we have actually been inclined to have that unless we were using something that is so deeply held, such as a religious belief?
We've started this show 1.5 years or 2 years ago, and we've had lots of hard conversations, and Satan never once came into the conversation.
But we're not strangers, and it just
No.
did. Like, the only reason this whole conversation came up is because these people who are members of the Satanic Temple had a big speech in a public space that ruffled a lot of feathers because they all look like they're from a heavy metal band. You remember how we've talked in the past? We've touched on it a couple of different times. How scam artists, they use like this sort of they intentionally make scams sound stupid, like the African prince wanting to transfer you money. And it's intentional. It's like
It
a
really
litmus
does.
test to see.
It's my uncle, by the way, and he's from Nigeria,
Whatever.
and he does have
Whatever.
$93 million he's going to deposit
Yeah.
in my account next week. Come on.
But they're intentionally stupid because they're not trying to fool smart people. They're trying to find the dumb people to sucker them into it. To a certain sense, I look at this the inverse of that. The people who can look past the satanic imagery to see the actual values and the core ideology behind the Satanic Temple, those are the people that I want on board with making changes in the world. If people bounce off of it just because of the iconography, I don't know if I really want them to be part of the conversation. If they can't get past that initial super simple barrier, just the coat of paint, they're judging the whole book by its cover, and I want to deal with people who are more. I want to deal with people who are curious, not judgmental.
Okay.
So I'm not. That's why I have absolutely no issue with the satanic imagery, and I almost like the fact that it's there, and I kind of like the fact that it's a little bit offensive because it does function as kind of a barrier of entry. I don't like it alluding to gatekeeping, but it means that the people who are going to join into that conversation, especially people on the right who are going to join into a proper, healthy conversation with people from the Satanic Temple, are people who are going to be curious and are willing to look past that coat of paint. And I like that. I like that it kind of forces people to push past that initial ick.
Go ahead, Chase.
Well, I would say I would just kind of add on to that and say, like in how I know you, I don't want to simply go, okay, he is a Christian or he's conservative, and then that informs the rest of my value or the entire judgment of your character or who you are. That is simply a singular aspect. And so the more we can push for that whole larger conversation where, yeah, when it's something that is initially considered offensive, it says, okay, are we actually going to have a conversation? Or do we just need our yelling points?
I have I have to think about this a fair bit. I don't like to. I'm slow to speak, so I might address this in a future episode.
Yep.
You'll just have to tune in to find out.
But I'll say one thing that Ozzy Osbourne, Alice Cooper, a number of people in the hard rock world have taken the image of Satanism, used it as a tool for their entertainment, right? It's used as
Sure.
imagery. They've used it as a tool, and so they can gain followers. Who they gain is not the middle of the road.
You're right. They gain those that have been rejected by society.
I think they gain those who agree with their viewpoint.
No, they gain those that have not been accepted and are looking for a place to belong. And if they don't feel that they fit to societal norms, we look in different places for it. We look for people and for communities that can accept us for who we are and to grow. And so the darker imagery, it's because kids frequently feel like they have not been able to have conversations with their parents or in polite society, and so it's the communal aspect that brings the appeal of it. Do bands absolutely or other groups use that to make money? Oh, of course they do, but it does provide something essential that people need.
I don't know that I'll agree with you on that one, although I won't argue it, as there is a communal aspect of the hard rock, really any genre of anything. You could take music, you could take art of any kind, and you'll find a communal aspect in it. So I won't argue that part of it, because I think that there's a lot of, it's true. In any aspect of art, it'll have a communal aspect.
That's a large part of the appeal of the church, of the Christian church, is the community aspect.
Absolutely. I want to readdress this in a couple of weeks if we could, or maybe next month. I have lots of questions. I want to research this. I came into this, and actually on purpose, I came into it blind, because I didn't want to come in with arguments in place. I more want to come in with questions. It's one thing that it's hard for me to readily look for common ground when one is based on a belief system and one is based on what you don't believe in.
And that's where I think you're slightly missing the. Go ahead, Will.
No, you go for it. I think we're on the same page here.
Actually, so it's not about what we don't believe. It's just that our beliefs are not pulled from a Bible. That's where our tenets come into play, where we should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance to reason, and to push for the struggle, to push onward for justice, and that it's a necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. These are our religious beliefs. These are core values to ourselves. But we also acknowledge that they can be changed when presented with better information. So it allows for a greater freedom in that. So it's not about what we don't believe in. It's simply our beliefs are a little bit more fluid.
So let me ask a question, if you don't mind. And I don't want to
shoot.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here. But I'm reading your tenets. I'm actually going to throw them on the screen. I think I can do this.
Yeah, you can block me.
Nope, that's the wrong one.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm looking at the tenets. I want to look at number 3, because this obviously is going in one of the areas that here that Will and I have talked a lot about over the course of the last 3 years with all the mandates and all that kind of nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And I would read this that's saying that all the vaccine mandates are bad. And yet I believe, if I can speak for you, William, that you don't hold that mandates are necessarily bad.
I think that mandates are a last ditch, a last resort type thing. So there's a you've read iRobot, right?
I
Or you've
watched the
certainly seen the
movie.
movie. Yeah.
I've seen the movie. It was a
Same.
long time ago.
Three laws of robotics are pretty much consistent throughout. But one of the laws of robotics is that a robot has the right to defend itself as long as it doesn't interfere with the first and third laws, I believe.
Right.
There's a nuance to, you can have complete bodily autonomy, but can you have complete bodily autonomy if the act of that bodily autonomy is taking it away from other people? This is why it's a much more nuanced thing than just my body, my choice, because another person's choice with their body is potentially going to actively negatively influence another person's body. And so then it becomes a question of how far does one person's soul dominion over their body, how much are we going to allow them to affect other people before like a larger group has to step in and say, no, you have to do this for the benefit of everybody.
Even though your body is inviolable and subject to your own will alone.
So
But-
that's where, if it were to be legally enforced, where you are literally being forced to have a vaccine put inside your bodily autonomy is being violated.
Okay.
To simply have rules in society about what you're going to do if you don't follow certain rules, that's still not violating your autonomy. It's simply putting rules in place. It would not be dissimilar to, you're allowed to not wear any clothes, but there's still going to be a consequence if you go walking down the street nude.
Okay.
So I think I failed to see how, with things like vaccine mandates, how one's bodily autonomy has been violated.
And if I can guess, Dave, that the route you're going to take is that they did everything but actively force a person to take the vaccine, taking away
I'm
their
actually not
ability
going to go down
to
that
places of
route.
business.
As I don't want to go down. I find that this was just an example for me, and we can look at this in the future. We're hitting an hour here, so we can look at it in the future. I think that when you take the Americans have found this in the Constitution. That's why there's all the amendments.
Mhm.
If you have 8 rules or 7 rules here, I think, and you say
7
here,
tenants, yeah.
here's our foundation, and yet there's going to be an exception. Well, we're going to make rules which make this where it no longer is or inviolable. And I look at this, and I believe it's like the Constitution, Will, where you're going to go over time. You're going to realize, hey, maybe we need a few more. Maybe we need some clarifications or amendments onto our Constitution, onto our fundamental tenets.
These 7 tenets aren't a system of governance.
Right.
There's 7 ideological cornerstones as opposed to a form of governance. So these existing in their simplified format,
Yes.
I think is perfectly fine. Obviously, I wouldn't want to build an entire system of government off of just those 7. There would be amendments. There would be more detail to it. That would be a necessity.
I'm going to give you the final wrap-up word here, Chase. We're going to wrap up the show, and you get to close it.
Alrighty. One of the things with the tenants that's I think the 7th one really does embody things perfectly with what we were talking about here, is that every tenant is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility and action of thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word, which is why, by necessity, these tenets, if they could be shown to be harmful, are amenable to change. And that is ultimately what we want, is we want to see reason prevail. We want to see us be able to change as individuals and as a society to act on the best information that we currently have. And that happens in part by having conversations like what we're having today, where we can listen to each other, debate, and discuss different ideas, find common ground, and find disagreements.
Oh, there's no disagreements here this week, is there? On that note, we're going to wrap up the show because I think we have a lot to unpack with this one. I'm going to go home after, well, I am home, but I'm going to go and I'm going to read a few of these links, and I'm never going to agree with you, except I am going to look for common ground, as I think it's important to look for areas where we can at least have a conversation. And I want to encourage all of you watching, if you can find anybody with whom you have as opposite a belief system as Chase and I do, you really need to go out and have coffee with them. Have a conversation and listen to them, because odds are you will find some common ground there somewhere.
And for any of you who are listening or watching this on YouTube, we're going to include a whole slew of links in the doobly-doo down below. If you want to learn more about the Satanic Temple or find some more information around it and about it, Chase was kind enough to give us some really cool resources that we can throw down there for anyone to click on and check out at their leisure. If you're listening to this in a podcast, go look up the YouTube video and find them.
We don't have a podcast anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And just if I can throw in one last note
yes,
of encouragement to people, just dare to be curious and question your preconceptions.